Hello everyone, so my name is Lily and I'm the book blogger behind Utopia State of Mind, and this is the continuation of the series for series starters that would make great gifts for the holidays or just, gifts for any occasion. Today I'm going to start with YA fantasy recommendations. I thought that I could fit both of these different genres into one video, but when I was making a list I realized that there's way too many books for one video, so definitely grab yourself some kind of snack or something to drink so we can hop right into it. So I've divided this by, I'm going to first talk about books where all three of the books of the trilogy or the duology are out, and then I'm going to work my way back. So where two books are out and then one book are out, just because if you're looking for books where you could get all of them, for example, all at once, or if that's what you're looking for, you can start there and kind of work your way backwards, just based on what your preference is. So I'm going to start talking about book series where all three books in the series are out. So the first trilogy I want to talk about is one of my all-time favorite trilogies, and that is The Reader. For the trilogies, I didn't bring down all of the books because I wouldn't have enough hands to hold all of them, but it is The Reader by Tracy Chee. It is one of my favorite trilogies in the world, or like favorite series in the world, and so if you keep hearing me talk about it over and over again, that is why. But as I've said now multiple times, this book really celebrates the magical power and transformation ability of reading. And I know I've talked about that a lot, so I'm actually going to talk about some other elements that I really love about The Reader, and it's certainly the characters and the action. So there's such a really great sense of action that pulls you through the entire series, and the intrigue definitely leaves you wanting to read every next installment. And I do think that Tracy Chee's writing and the characters and the whole world definitely evolves and grows in a really satisfying way to witness. So you can see that evolution in the series as a whole, and that's why I think it's one of the most perfect gifts for any person, because it has been such a joy to read and such a joy to share, especially knowing that the joy of reading is so prevalent in the series. It's kind of just something I continue going back to, and I've actually reread this series at least once. I want to say I've read it like once and a half, basically, and every time I still love it. In my reread, I wrote these annotations for all of the pages that I love, and there's just so many beautiful kind of Easter egg things, from just little notes on the actual pages to pages that are blanked out or pages that look like they're from a book. So it's just a perfect book for book lovers in general, and if you haven't read this series, please, please, please try it out, and then you can give it to someone that you love. The next series also will come at no surprise, but it is the Bone Witch trilogy by Rinchi Pecco. I love this trilogy so much with my heart because T is such a fabulous character. She is really empathetic, and she cares a lot about kind of her own friends and family, but also the world as a whole in ways that people don't really understand and in ways that are hidden from us. It's definitely a series that would maybe lean into like a darker YA fantasy because there's necromancy in it, and if that bothers you, definitely you shouldn't pick this up. I'm a huge fan of necromancy, so this was an instant win for me, and it just makes such a home in my heart. I've reread this series too, and it still holds up to my original expectations, but it's all just about finding the person who's telling your story and what story do you want to be remembered for, because there are so many times in which your truths and the events of your life is being misrepresented, or what your motivations are. So that is definitely explored within this series as a whole in such a beautiful and nuanced way. The next trilogy I want to talk about, which I don't know where my first copy of the trilogy is, so I'm holding up the second one. This is the Black Wings Beating trilogy. The second one is called Red Skies Falling, and the third one's called Gold Wings Rising by Alex London. It is it is just so fun, and it is magical killer birds mixed with siblings, mixed with queer identity, mixed with just political manipulation, and also kind of like what I was talking about with the Bone Witch, a lot about truth and perception and history. And I've been so proud to be reading Black Wings Beating since before it was published. I read an arc of it. And the last one I wanted to talk about is another favorite of mine, the Timekeeper trilogy by Tara Sim. This is so underrated, and I feel like I don't really hear anyone talking about it. This is also a queer fantasy trilogy, and it is about magical clocks and ghost spirits, essentially. And it's such a unique world building that I just can't get over how cool it is, and the characters as well in this really are so vulnerable and raw, and the love and friendships they develop throughout the series and throughout each book just make your heart kind of ache for them. And in general, I think it's just such a clever and well thought out trilogy. If you're intrigued by the idea of clock magic and ghosts and being frozen in time, then you should check this out, because it is severely and criminally underrated. So in this next section, I want to talk about books where the first 2 books of a trilogy have released. The first one I want to talk about is Crown of Feathers. It is stunning. I own all of the editions that are in regular and the Owl Crate ones, so I definitely did not have enough hands for that. But it's a multiple perspective, and it has phoenixes in it, so phoenixes are your thing. This series should be part of your TBR, because what I loved about this is the multiple perspective allows you to really get a close, in-depth look at each of the characters and how they're grappling with their past and their ideas for the future. This is such a great series because there's so many different plot threads. I really don't know how Nikki is able to weave all of this through. And I was on the street team for Heart of Flames, so I was able to read an early copy of that as well. And I was just so stunned by how masterful the writing is, and also how Nikki's writing has grown from the first one. And I can't wait for the third one as well. So it's a perfect opportunity to pick up books 1 and 2 before book 3 releases, because based on the events and the action, and also the surprises and the shocks and the twists here are like, they are really great. You will just be gasping. I don't know if also people have seen the webtoon. So there are just a variety of different ways that you can enjoy this series and Nikki's Phoenixes. And for me, my favorite element definitely had to be the sister relationships and how complex that is. That's kind of one of my favorite elements in general in a lot of different books. So the fact that it was in this book just made it even more fantastic than I thought it was already. The next series I want to talk about is Heart of Thorns. I don't have a copy of Heart of Thorns with me. It has 2 books already out, and I'm actually reading an arc of the 3rd right now, so I definitely had to include this. If you really liked Grace and Fury, I think you would really like Heart of Thorns. There's a lot about sisterhood, and there's a lot about betrayal. There's so much betrayal. It's about magic, and it's also, there's some heavy trigger warnings associated with it, so definitely make sure you look at those before. But it's also about healing and trauma, and about like what happens after these horrible things have happened to you and how do you heal. That's definitely more what the 3rd book is about, and the 1st and 2nd books are kind of coming to terms with what's happened. How do you share that with your loved ones? How do you see yourself afterwards? So it's definitely a trilogy that has some really intense roots, and for me, book 1 and book 2 like really got me deep for those elements, and now book 3 is sort of maintaining all of that momentum, and I really love it. When I read Heart of Thorns, I immediately had read it after Grace and Fury, and it just made so much more of an impact for me, and it talks a lot about women and being feared for the potential of if they have magic. So there's all of that kind of wrapped up into it, and it is really nuanced and really complex and just really fabulous, and I hope more people read it. So the next series I want to talk about are the Gilded Wolves. I'm a huge fan of the Gilded Wolves. I love this series so much. It's multiple perspective. You're gonna hear that a lot. That's one of my favorite elements of books. And Roshani is just such a fabulous writer. Everything has been so masterful and clever. So it's a heist type novel, and what I loved so much about this is that Roshani brings all of the characters' identities to the forefront in a seamless, organic way, but also it almost seems like self-aware, right? So in one of the books, as they're talking about a heist, they're thinking about like the idea of objects and the idea of object acquisition, right? Who gets to acquire objects and from whom? And I think this has been a large theme in colonization. For example, the stealing of artifacts and art and just, culture, history, language, just a huge amount of theft, basically. But it's really talked a lot about in the Gilded Wolves and the Silvered Serpents, which I don't see in a lot of heist novels, is the actual thinking about what you're stealing and the history of what you're stealing. So that's why I really love this one particularly. I mean, I could go on and on about all of these series and talk about how much I love the characters and the angst and the romance and all of these, all of those things. But I'm trying to just pare it down to what I love. The next series I want to talk about is one also that is super close to my heart. It is Girls of Paper and Fire. And so I remember reading an arc of this, and I remember being so moved by the journeys of the main characters and their struggles with trauma and also being a survivor and healing. So I think, for example, if you really love some of those themes, then, for example, you should pick up Heart of Thorns. I think that they would make great conversation books. But this is also in such a beautiful... I think I loved Girls of Paper and Fire, but the sequel, Girls of Shadow and Storm, that has been my favorite so far. Just because it talks a lot about letting trauma and letting that stuff change you, and how do you let it change you and into what kind of person. So I know that so many people love this book series, so I just wanted to remind you how much I love this book series. It's just all about girls who are trying to survive and to exist and be happy and to love, and it is heart-wrenching but also so beautiful. And the last trilogy I want to talk about, the first two are out, is The Tiger at Midnight. I also don't know if people would have assumed that I was going to talk about this. I do a lot. The Tiger at Midnight is just such a fun book. It's about kind of assassins and enemies, and all of these different elements come together, and it makes such a beautiful tapestry of fantasy. So it talks... What I loved about this one, and I guess this is also a one where I also loved the sequel a lot more, The Archer at the Dawn, just because of the ways that it is building on to the foundations of this book. So for me, this book was super entertaining, lots of action. I really loved reading these characters interact and getting to know them. But then in Archer at the Dawn, it's so great to watch them grow and watch them change, right? Once we've realized that the world around us may not work the way we thought it did, or that our perceptions, our personalities are different, how do we change? And how do we stay with the same people like around us and our friends and our family? How do we thoroughly change our person? I feel like that's going to be a theme where I like sequels a lot better, and I think it really just has to comes down to the fact that the first books lay so much foundation, and the second books really allow you to sink down deeper and to get into the meat of the character evolution and the meat of the overall kind of plot evolution. So the last category I want to talk about are trilogies where only one book is out. I only have 2 of these actually, and then I have a few that are questions because I'm not really sure. I'll make sure to clarify in the description box below with all the links. But the first has to be The Court of Miracles, Les Mis plus the Jungle Book. I feel like that is such a great description of this book. But it has such... It has really great characters, but characters that are struggling with their future. And okay, a lot of characters struggle with their future. Let me explain. So I've talked in other reviews about how there's this glittering top elite kind of world and this decaying foundation of corruption and like greed, and betrayal. And so it's about figuring out, where does our future lie? Are we going to be fully immersed ourselves in one or the other? Can we live a life of both of them? Are we able to transition? Like, where in this world, it seems driven by this dichotomy, where can we find our future? I cannot wait for the rest of the books in the series, and I hope that they are all as gorgeous as this one. The next one I want to talk about is Nocturna, and Nocturna has such beautiful and interesting world building and characters. So it talks a little bit about colonialism and all of the kind of impact on a culture and a fantasy culture. But what I also loved is that one of the main characters can face shift, so kind of change their face into like other people, and I think that is such a unique concept. And the second one hasn't come out yet. It's supposed to come out next year. And I am just so excited for it because I remember reading it and immediately knowing that I needed to have a copy of it on my shelf. Just because, of course, the characters are really fabulous and also kind of really vulnerable in a way that is really endearing but also super relatable. But also the world building and that intriguing concept just really hooked me from the beginning. And it is only really developed more because you think about your face, right? And it's like, this is my face. But you never really think about, okay, if I could have anyone's face, what would I do? Whose face would I have? What would I use those different faces for? And then also, would I ever see my own face? How much would my own perception of my face and myself really change because of that power? So the next two I want to talk about, I'm not really sure if they're duologies or trilogies. I think that they're duologies, so, you know, fingers crossed. But as I said, I will let you know in the description box. The first is Scavenge the Stars by Terra Sim. Okay, 2 Terra Sim series in this. I'm a fan. But this is a beautiful book. Oh, I didn't really notice how reflective that was. And it's kind of like a Count of Monte Cristo retelling. But it also has that similar vibe I was talking about with Court of Miracles, where there's this society that is so decadent and so, I want to say so thriving, but thriving at the cost of others. So that is one of the huge themes, and revenge is a huge theme as well. If you love the idea of revenge, or if you love like Count of Monte Cristo, which I haven't read yet, I think that you definitely have to check this out. And I'm so excited for the sequel. And the next series I want to talk about is These Violent Delights. I know there's a sequel. I thought it was just a duology and not a trilogy. So as I said, I'll let you know if I'm right. But I mean, I struggle to talk about These Violent Delights just because doesn't everyone know how much I love this book? Like, it's a 1920s retelling of Romeo and Juliet. It has completely overwritten the original for me. I don't know who Shakespeare is, but I know who Chloe Gong is, so that's gotta count for something. It is just, the angst in this book is so, like, beautiful, and the writing in this is just gorgeous. I made 12 hand-lettering pieces, I think, for this book, and it is entirely because I was so inspired by Chloe's writing and the ways that it had just gorgeous writing in general, but also writing, you know, that writing that cuts you to the core, that in one simple sentence is able to say so plainly something so immense. This is full of that, okay? And I know everyone who's read it needs a sequel, so you can definitely pick this up and wait with us all for the sequel to this book. Now I want to talk about some duologies, and as normal, I'm going to start with duologies where both books are out in the series. So the first one I want to talk about is one that I don't hear a lot about in general, and I really love this series because of the world building. So it's The Girl from Everywhere and The Ship Beyond Time. I have them, different formats, and also like different covers, so it's kind of a mess, but I have both of these. And it's this idea where if you have a map of a place, you can go to it. And it doesn't matter the time or the location, you know, like the place and time is what I mean to say. And I just loved that idea for traveling and that fantasy idea. And it also talks a lot about your relationship with your family and being haunted by your past and your mistakes and not knowing how to ever, like, come away from that, essentially. So the father-daughter relationship in this complex and kind of heart-wrenching because you have 2 characters also who you don't know if they will ever kind of make it to where they both want to be, and where is that really? So I really loved this series, but just, I mean, purely also because of the world building, but yes, and the characters. And I remember being just so swept away with it, and I think that it's such a unique concept. The next I want to talk about is We Set the Dark on Fire. This is such a... When I think of enemies to lovers, or like that kind of vibe, or I guess it's that kind of trope, right? When I think of enemies to lovers, this is what I think of. This is so well done. When I think of the characters and the tension and the growth that they have in the duology, I am just shook at how fabulous that is. And it's also about revolution and rebellion, and how do we figure out like what we really want, and also maybe what we want from others. So all of that is kind of wrapped up together in such a beautiful way. The next duology is The Brilliant Death. This is actually an old copy. They have since then redone the covers. This is an old edition of the cover, but I love it. I love this one, essentially. And this one has also such a really fabulous world building and magical system. It's about transformation, and it's about figuring out your personal dreams versus your family's dreams. And it's kind of also, I would say, kind of Italian mafia-esque style with these, and also not fitting in, and like how long can you not fit in before you decide to just leave? I also love that it has so much gender bending and so much queerness in it. I think that these characters are so underrated in terms of kind of fantasy duologies, and also just so vulnerable on the pages, and their journeys as they go through, even in just the first book alone, their journey that they go through is just so heart-wrenching to see how they struggle to figure out themselves, and also their place in their world and in their family as well. We are coming into the last couple books, so maybe get a top up on your snacks and drinks. The next series I want to talk about is The Ever Cruel Kingdom, The Never Tilting World. Never Tilting World is the first one, and Ever Cruel Kingdom is the second one, just for clarification. I love what Rin Chupeco has done. Oh, and this is also, I guess, the second Rin Chupeco book series I'm talking about. But I love what Rin Chupeco has done with the idea of environmental fantasy destruction. That was definitely what drew me the most to the first one, was just this idea of what happens when we're not being able to control the elements around us, and it has such a destructive path and such a destructive effect on our lives and our future. And in the second one, we talk a lot about the cycle of this. What should we have done? What should we do? How can we break the cycle of our mistakes in the past? I cannot stress how much I love both of these books. And it is definitely one of my favorite duologies, period, because it talks about that, and it talks a lot about sacrifice, and are all the sacrifices we're making necessary? Is there really no other way to make a future for ourselves? The next duology I want to talk about is Reign of the Fallen and Song of the Dead. This is also necromancy. As I said, I really like necromancy. So this is such a fantastic cast of characters. I remember getting the character cards for this series and just being so happy to see their faces. And there's dragons and little animal companions, especially in Song of the Dead. So if you read Reign of the Fallen, it's ooh, I wish there were more dragons. Then you have to read the sequel to find the dragons. But it also is dealing with addiction and also dealing with grief. Reign of the Fallen is heavily delving into those different themes, and also delving into the themes of trying to figure out what is happening. So there's definitely a mysterious element to this one. And I just loved talking about necromancy and grief and addiction all in one, and the friendships that you make and the relationships that you have, essentially. It's such a fantastically well done duology, and also I feel like I don't see enough hype for it, considering how fun these covers are with this bejeweled skull and this bejeweled bird. But it is one of my favorite, and when I think of necromancy books, which honestly I don't have a ton of one because there aren't enough of them, but when I think of my top ones, this is definitely up there with The Bone Witch, which is why it's in this video. And this brings me to the last section where I'm going to talk about duologies where only the first book is out, and I only have two, and they're all recent releases, which kind of makes sense, right? So the first one is Lobizona. I don't know if you've heard of Lobizona, but but it is such a fantastic book about existence. So the little taglines, for example, for here, they say undocumented, unprotected, unafraid. And while that is a huge part of Lobizona about existence and immigration and identity, it's also so freaking fun. It's about like I don't want to talk too much about it because I feel like sometimes it runs a little bit into spoiler territory. But basically, I read part of Lobizona and I was like, oh yeah, I'm really feeling these elements. And then I read another part of it and it was like completely transformed it, where it talks about gender stereotypes and gender roles, and also talks about like a magical society, magical schooling kind of system. And it ends up being like a book that continuously takes you to different places and thrills you in different ways throughout the whole course of the book. I'm so excited for the sequel, and I cannot wait until 2021 for all these sequels. And the final book I want to talk about is Where Dreams Descend. It is definitely one of my favorite books I've read this year, just because I'm a huge fan this year of ambitious girls, and this is also where it's at. So she wants to be a magician, like above anything, and this is in a world where you can't really be a female magician. Like normally they're just assistants, but she's like, nope, I'm gonna do it. And then it's about her journey to try to be finding that future for herself in a world that really doesn't believe in her. And there's also a lot of dark, mysterious elements and secret pasts and betrayals, and the magic in here is so fun. Like in general, this is one of those things where I love the main character, and then the journey that they go on and the action that happens to them is so fantastic, and it continuously thrills me that I need the sequel, like right now, essentially. So this brings me to the end of all the YA fantasy series starters that make great gifts, and in the case of a lot of these, you can actually make multiple gifts because books 1, 2, or also maybe 3 are out. I will leave, as always, the links to the books down below, and also my own social media links. You can find in-depth reviews about basically all of these books on my blog, in case my very frazzled, very quick, kind of on-the-go analysis was not suitable enough for your buying. I totally understand. As I said, there are full-length reviews on the blog. I hope that you all have a great day, and I will see you in the YA sci-fi series starters. Bye!